So we get a lot of questions when we talk about startups. I get a lot of questions individually, and I think when we're together, from people asking a really good question. How do you find a co-founder? And what do you look for in a co-founder? And how did you find Julian? And considering 65% of startups fail because of co-founder drama, and there's a famous expression, more startups die by suicide than by murder, which I think is a reference to competition versus focusing on executing and keeping your own house in order. I think it's something that we've done exceptionally well. And so I guess the question is to you. What do you look for in a co-founder? How did you find me? And what advice would you give to a younger version of you or someone that is at the beginning of their founder journey?
Where did you get that number for 65%? Like, is that a number you got somewhere?
That isn't a number I got somewhere. I'll find it for you. I'll find.
I was just like, it sounded very specific. So
I looked it up. I'm not ready to cite my sources, though. I should be. A tool bag.
Yeah. Where do you find a co-founder? I mean, look, let's be outside of I went looking for a startup to go work at, and I got incredibly lucky and landed at Pose. That was my first full-time job out of college, and it was the company where I met you. And it was a stellar place in terms of the people that worked there. It's weird because I didn't have any intentionality in finding a co-founder, right? Like, I didn't go to Pose looking for a co-founder. I went to Pose because I was like, I need a job, and two, I wanted to work at a startup that was in LA because I didn't want to move. And then I also got lucky because I happened to be working for Darren when he got hired as CTO at Pose, and he just brought me along for the ride. So like, it's a weird question because, especially for me at least, it's just a whole lot of serendipity. I guess maybe if you were to break it down, if I were to give myself a little bit more credit in terms of like what I did and what I was intentional about, was I said, I want to go work at a startup. I want to go find a place that is full of smart people that I would want to work with. And that was where you ended up too. So I don't know, maybe you tell your side of that story of how you ended up at Pose.
Well, you answered the question how we met each other, and that's an interesting story. But I think the question is looked at rightly with some mystery.
Yeah,
it's a really important relationship, and I think it's interesting for us to try to answer it because I don't really even know what my answer is, and I get asked it so often. And I think if there's something we can analyze or reflect upon in our relationship or our experience, maybe we'll learn something that we didn't know before and be able to help other people pattern match or avoid problems or have healthier relationships.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. Yes, you're right. I didn't answer the question of like, how did I choose you as a co-founder? I answered the question of like how we generally met. But I don't think you can separate the two, right? Because like, choosing who you work with, by definition, you have to pick them out of a circle of people that you know, right?
Do you? That's actually, you know what, in characteristic Julian and Nick fashion, let's annoyingly go to first principles on this. Like, what are the possible inputs for the top of that funnel or that pipeline? People you know, obviously. Mm-hmm. Really, there are only two types of people you know and people you don't, right? So that's funny. Of the people you know.
Well, okay. Hold on. Wait, no, it's not a binary. It's like, there's people that are like lifelong friends or family, and then there's
family. I would put those long-term.
Yeah, those are two distinct.
So friends and family.
There's friends, family, and even friends. It's like, you have your very close friends, like you have buddies that you have known since you were a child and you still keep in contact with. You have friends that you've met fairly recently as an adult. I would say, like, maybe like let's call it post college friends that you've met, right? Those are different. Not that they can't be just as rich and deep relationships, but they're different from like your friends from when you were a kid. And then beyond that, there's like acquaintances. So like, I know people that I've met at networking events that I wouldn't say are my friends, but they're acquaintances. Like, if I met them, I would remember their name and I'd say hi, and I'd remember a couple of things that they told me about them last time I saw them, but I wouldn't call them friends necessarily. And then there's your enemies.
I guess so, yeah. So I'm going to be opinionated here, and I'm going to put a few buckets in, okay? We've got family, and family businesses are a species of business that is very specific. that both
I
of
have
us have
stories from
experienced.
in my own family if we want to talk about
I think it
family
might be interesting.
co-founders.
I think it might be
Yeah.
interesting. So there's family, there is friends. I'm going to limit this. I'm going to say friends, whether they're childhood or adulthood. I'm just going to call them friends. People that you primarily know and initially built a relationship on a purely social, non-professional basis. The second one is I'm going to put professional network friends or people, right? And the fourth one is strangers. I'm going to put those into 4 buckets, right? And each of those 4 buckets has some humongous trade-offs, pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
We fell into the third bucket, right? The professional. You and I met each other in the context of working together. And I think that's really important. Dustin Rosen paid us to de-risk our co-founder relationship. Thank you, Dustin, if you're listening. And for those of you that don't know, Dustin Rosen is a great guy, and he was the founder and CEO of a startup called Pose, and he is now a venture capitalist and an investor. And he is the one that hired both Julian and me. We did not know one another prior to working together. And in fact, I thought you were a different Julian, and someone had said something about another Julian that I maybe should keep my eye on Julian, and didn't delineate which Julian. And so
yeah, I think we had a contractor at the time who was a design contractor. So I think that was why.
Yeah. So I didn't know.
They told you. I remember. No disrespect to this Julian, but I was like kind of upset. Like I feel like Julian's a more unique name, and when they hired another Julian, I was like, there's already 2 Julians here. What's going on?
And so in the first few days or weeks I knew you, I was kind of like, who's this guy? I got to figure him out. But I think the interesting archetypes of that relationship, I think, are worth remarking upon, because if we're going to try to do a post-mortem on this, the ability to meet someone on a professional level and build trust with them by building product together, which you and I did, right? We were effectively peers at the level of our career. You were working on mobile development. I was working on product design. And we got to spend almost 2 years getting paid, getting a paycheck, working hard, staying up late nights sometimes, putting out fires, but ultimately, in hindsight, building trust and friendship with one another in a work context. And then we went our separate ways. And there might be some interesting stuff for us to talk about with what you did after Pose. You went to work with, you weren't a co-founder, but there are actually some shapes of that relationship that are co-founder-esque that you had with another professional contact from that same company, from Pose. Went on to start a second company, and I went my own way. And then after several years, of getting together for food or drinks and pitching each other ideas, something finally stuck, and we ended up starting 1 and then 2 companies together. So we fall, I think, squarely in bucket 3: professional colleagues first, then friends, then co-founders. Would you agree with my characterization of that?
Yeah. And I would add that, part of that time at Pose that was important. I think very important for this part of it. It wasn't just the business, the business side of it, where we were like working together late nights and, de-risking our founder relationship. It was also that we liked to hang out with each other outside of work. Like it wasn't just like we were good work colleagues. Like we ended up becoming actual friends outside of work too.
So yes, we fell squarely into that third bucket. And I think it's really important, because I think a lot of people that have asked me that question, particularly younger people. So I've spoken to a lot of university level classes on entrepreneurship and startups. And this is a question that comes up over and over again. And what's interesting is usually the people asking that question in that context are university students, whether they're undergraduate or graduate students. So they're on the younger side of the spectrum. They have slightly less professional experience, presumably. Advice I would give those people is go out and work on things and meet people, right? Like the more people you meet, the more people you collide with, the more people you collaborate with, the more you're going to know who you can trust and who you can't, who you can rely on and who you can't, et cetera. And I think that's a really, really important part of the formula. And over the years...
And sorry to interrupt, but I'll also throw in, you learn about yourself too.
Yeah.
Like I think that's an important part of it is that you learn what you're capable of, what your skill set is, and who can be complementary to that skill set. I think that's actually a pretty important part of it.
Should we talk a bit? I mean, we could go deeper on professional colleagues and us and how we learned how to work well with one another. But I also think there's a lot of interesting stuff to explore about the other configurations, about working with family members, with personal friend relationships where people started first as a personal social friend and then became a co-founder. I have one experience with that, with a person who is still a close friend of mine, although that was a very difficult relationship being co-founders. And I've talked about it at length with him. I mean, let's start there. So let's talk about friends. What's interesting is so much of this comes down, in my opinion, to trust. And trust is a really tricky, amorphous thing that we all have a lot of difficulty defining, but really exists and really is, if we look at it as a substrate of getting things done, it is a force multiplier, right? Like a high trust environment is going to communicate better and more effectively, going to cohere better, and I genuinely believe will outperform, all things being equal, another team that does not have the same level of trust. With friends, I think what's interesting, so of these 4 buckets, I think it is self-evident that strangers, that 4th bucket, complete strangers, right? You go to a founder speed dating thing in the Bay Area, right? Complete strangers, you're starting from scratch from a trust perspective. And that's really interesting and important. It might seem obvious, but I'm trying to break down the mechanics of these relationships and trust.
Well, let me throw in one caveat, right? Like if you're meeting somebody who has a pedigree of some kind, like they previously started as something, or they have a track record that's public of some kind, like you might be starting from a higher baseline of trust for specific things, right? Like maybe it's their skill set, maybe it's their network, maybe it's like there's all kinds of different things that like you may be starting from a higher baseline of trust just from that outward pedigree. But the direct like personal relationship trust, you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, what's interesting actually is as I'm drawing a picture in my brain of trust here, there is an inbound trust, and then there's like an outbound. This isn't quite right. Trust is like when you have a stranger relationship, it is harder and slower to build trust from scratch. But there's also a lack of inertia in a good way. And like if something goes wrong, your level of hesitation to walk away from it is going to be the lowest on that spectrum, right? Like on the spectrum of, I think I would put it in order of family, friends, professional colleagues, and strangers, right? That's the inverse direction of, if something goes wrong and you're a stranger, screw you, man, I'm gone. And
like a catastrophic, like if something goes catastrophically wrong and you perceive it as your co-founder's fault, you're just like, it's more easy to just go, I'm out. This is your problem now.
Exactly right. And on the other end of the spectrum, right, that's maybe one of the worst parts of working with family is that there's something really beautiful. There's something really efficient. There's something really, I want to say efficient about almost like at will employment, right? Like in the state of California, where if something's not working out, like we're not trapped here. Like I can go where my labor is in demand and you can do your thing. And if I don't like you or I don't like what we're working on or I don't trust you, I can go do my own thing. Family is much harder for obvious reasons. It's much harder to walk away, even if walking away is what is technically or on paper best in that situation. And I think these are 2 sides of the same coin. On the other, I'm hopping in this 4 bucket categorization method a lot in a way that I'm worried is going to be annoying to future listeners, but that's maybe one of the strongest things working in favor of family businesses. So the almost the game theoretics of you saying like, my own brother's not going to screw me over. Like he might, but that your own brother is going to experience a lot of social stigma from that in-group of your family if he does screw you. And he knows he's going to face a lot of stigma if he screws you. And that he knows that if that happens, he's going to screw, that it's going to.
I actually have a little bit of a different take here. And it's both, so you're right. So that's half of it. The other half of it is that when something does go wrong, when somebody does get screwed over, if you're in a stranger relationship and if you have a stranger as your co-founder, somebody you've never met before, and then you get a year in and then like they do something or you're just not into it or whatever reason, you blow it up, you walk away, you never have to see that person again. In the family dynamic, so that both leads to like So that both leads to, one, it's easier for people to screw each other over because it's like, especially early when there's not much at stake yet, it's easier for you to go, I'm never going to see this person again anyway, so what does it matter? So you're right, in the family dynamic, there's stronger incentives to not do that because there's, obviously there's blood ties, there's a lot of social pressure not to do that kind of thing. But when it does happen, it bleeds into everywhere in your life.
Yeah.
You cannot separate your work life from your personal life anymore at that point because and I'll say this from experience, having not from a company that I started, but like from my family's business when I was growing up as a kid. For people who don't know, my family owned a fast food restaurant that my dad started, and he brought on 3 of his brothers to run it with him. And multiple times they got into fights with each other over who has a stake, who's getting paid, whether or not somebody's working hard enough. That led to I didn't see my cousins at Christmas a couple years because of these fights, right? So it's that's what's at stake, right? It's that's what makes it it's a deterrent somewhat, but when somebody doesn't care about the deterrent, then it ruins it. It's much more catastrophic.
I read once somewhere that family businesses are an institution or a structure as old as there have been humans, but that they are more frequent and they make up more of the economy in countries that have higher levels of corruption, which I find fascinating. Because if that's true, that basically implies that because the terms of engagement on the open market in your country or political regime are not as clear-cut and are not as functional, you need to rely upon the trust functions and the non-obvious levers of control and power, like grandma shaming you because I talked behind my back to her on Sunday afternoon at church that you're not holding up your end of the bargain, and she's going to give you the evil eye and scold you until you feel shame and then work better. That is, I think, obviously not a perfect arrangement, but it is maybe more perfect in societies where rule of law or corruption or are lower. Rule of law is lower, corruption is higher, maybe mafia style tactics are higher, et cetera. And I think this gets down to, you want to be able to meet someone. Well, this is weird because I don't know if this is a universal truth or if this is a subjective truth, but what I was going to say is I feel much more comfortable and much clearer when engaging with people in a way that is clean and direct and very aligned. That might sound obvious, right? But I've been teased a lot. I've been teased a lot in my career for being a Boy Scout, right? I love good lawyers and clear documentation, and
I'll admit some occasionally from me.
Yeah.
I have done some of that teasing.
I just love it because I think people that don't like process and lawyers and contracts and clear rules of engagement and clean lines, someone is not performing, they're gone, they're fired, whatever. People, I think, defer that labor or that work up front because it's extra work, right? It's like a prenuptial agreement of some kind.
Yeah.
It feels impersonal. And especially if you're using a good and expensive lawyer, like we've done many times, it's also expensive. It's upfront work that your brain kind of tricks you into thinking we don't really need, this isn't the highest priority thing right now. But many times in my career, if you zoom out and in hindsight, look at the total arc of the journey, it actually has saved so much time and money and headache. And this is completely outside of the realm of many family businesses. I've seen this up close and personally, right? There's my wife's family has a family business, and the degree to which there is an operational acceptance of reduced efficiency and increased dysfunction because that's not how families communicate or that's not how families do things, when it would make complete business sense to do something differently.
It's like the equivalent of tech debt, but legal debt, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's like here's the easier, faster thing to do. We're just gonna wink and handshake that this is the rate that I'm gonna pay you or whatever, right? In a family business, this is how much you're gonna get paid, or this is what your stake is. Don't worry, we all know, I'm not gonna screw you over.
Yeah.
But when there is a disagreement, when it happens, and I'm not saying it'll always happen, but it seems to happen pretty frequently.
Yeah. So
there comes that time when you're like, man, I really wish I'd written that down or gotten a lawyer involved early, so this is all decided and clean and whatever.
yeah, because I think it degrades trust. All this stuff comes back to trust for me. And this is something, so I feel like I'm meandering a bit. Let me refocus myself and both of us on this conversation around the original prompt of startup co-founders. What are better ideas and worse ideas when it comes to starting a company with somebody? Something that I don't see talked about very openly is co-founder, like organizational structure, legal structure, and particularly when it comes to equity breakdown and compensation, right?
Yeah.
So something I think we've done across multiple companies really well is, and that I've seen other startups not do well by accident or on purpose, is first of all, set up governance really clearly and set up lines of responsibility really clearly. Always make sure someone in any given scenario has the final call and that there's mutual buy-in, that if there's a tie or if there's confusion, disagree and commit is an appropriate path forward. Structuring compensation, as particularly equity compensation, with a vesting schedule. This is something that seems so obvious, but I've seen enough startups not realize this is a thing or kick the can down the road enough that it obviously is a problem. Any young founders that are listening to this, no matter what equity arrangement you come to with your co-founders, that arrangement should be tied to a vesting schedule and it should have a cliff. What does that mean? I'm assuming many people listening to this know what that means, but in case you don't know what that means, a vesting schedule is if I'm going to earn 10% of the stock in a company or equity in a company, I do not get all of that equity right away. I earn that equity over time. Usually it's a period of 4 years. And the cliff means that there is a period of time up front that if things don't go well, I don't earn any of my equity. Usually the appropriate period of time is 1 year. Now, this might sound technical, but trust me, if there are catastrophic trust issues, whether you choose to act on them or not, if there are catastrophic trust or execution issues with your co-founder or co-founders, they will be obvious in the first 12 months. Now, you might see them and choose to not act on them. That is something that happens all the time as well. But if they happen, you will see them in the first 12 months. And that is the time to course correct, to preserve your cap table from getting crazy and from toxic founders that aren't really pulling their weight to be dragging along. So I just wanted to get that out there. Second thing, I think so many people overvalue what has already been done and undervalue what is going to be done in the future. So I want to talk openly about something that was not catastrophically bad about the first time we started a company. In fact, it was fairly thoughtful and I think we felt good, but I think over time it got better. And that is how we structured equity in the company, right? So first I'm going to share a little story about a made up person that I think is emotionally true, right? Made up person has a great idea and they work really, really hard. Maybe they work really, really hard for weeks, for months, maybe even a year or two on an idea. And in those early days, everything seems asymmetrically difficult, right? I'm the only one out here talking to customers. I'm the only one out here coding. I'm the only one out here working, right? And then when someone joins you, there's this feeling that, well, I've done all this work already, right? I deserve to own or control 80% of this company. And so if you join my company, you're getting a tiny sliver of it. And that may or may not be appropriate. And there are some, I think, empirical measures of whether or not that's appropriate. But almost always, the person that has done all that very valid, very difficult work is overvaluing the work they've done to date. And if they are truly bringing on a genuinely valuable co-founder, they are undervaluing all the stuff that's going to happen in the future from that equity conversation, right? They're overvaluing year one and they're undervaluing year 2 through 10, in which most of the value is going to be accrued and built in that company. And so I invite you to disagree with me publicly if you think I'm saying something that's incorrect. I don't think in our first startup, I was anywhere near on the extreme end of that greed spectrum with equity.
No.
But I do think I overthought it.
Well, okay, look, let's tell we can tell the real version of what happened, right? Like it's only us. We're only going to embarrass ourselves by telling this story. It was just the two of us, right? So from what I remember, you left your job and started working on what was then Block, but became Pocket List. I want to say it was in like
November of 2016, the Friday before Donald Trump was first elected president.
why are you using that as the
Because
mile
it was
marker?
it was so traumatic.
Oh, you left in November of 2016, right?
Mhm.
I continued working at my job full time until I believe it was October. It was like October 1st. Like we're like, let's call it the end of September. I left my job the end of September. I started
The
working
following
on
year. Yeah.
Block in October 1st, 2017. So almost a full year. Like 11, you had 11 months on me. And in that time, you'd spent a lot of time noodling on stuff. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing anything, right? I was moonlighting, working on stuff on the side while I was still working full time. So it's not like I had no work output during that year, but you had the lion's share, the most time spent like talking to property managers, renters, like all the different people that we needed to be able to understand in order to build a product in that space. And so when I came on and I came full time and we decided I don't think, because we didn't officially create the Block HQ Inc. entity until then, right?
I don't remember the incorporation date, but that is very likely true.
But it was after I'd already left my job. I
believe
think
so. Yes, I believe so.
And I think the impetus was we were starting to fundraise. So we're like, we need a vehicle for people to put
Yes.
stuff into if we're going to fundraise.
We got to open bank accounts.
Yeah. And I remember the discussion that we had was A, the time you had put in, and B, you as the person who's going to be taking the CEO title was taking on more of the, I don't know if risk is the right word, but like more of the, let's say you had broader responsibility than a CTO would have, right? Because my
Sure.
job is primarily digital product and building a team and making sure that the delivery of the digital product goes out. Like it has almost nothing to do with, like, theoretically, I just want to I'm also trying to ground us in like our thinking at the time when we did this, because I know, because we're going to get around to like where that fell apart later. But the thinking initially was that like, okay, CTO is just engineering, which is valuable. It's not nothing. It's the, in any tech company, it's the engine of the company, but it's not sales. It's not marketing. It's not business development, which are all things when you don't have those roles, those typically fall on the CEO to do those things. So the argument went, okay, I already put in almost a year, and I'm taking the CEO role. I think I deserve a little bit, like, I don't think this should be a direct 50-50 split, which I agreed with. I didn't disagree with that logic. I can't remember if I pushed back or if we did a lot of going back and forth on it. But then the split was, and I thought the split was pretty fair. It was like something like 55-45 or something like that, or like 60-40 or something.
I think it's, so for my memory, in true Nick fashion, we were at least very thoughtful about it. I was at least very.
Oh yeah. No, I think there was a spreadsheet. I think there was a spreadsheet.
No, well, yeah, but I remember us getting in a room with a whiteboard and like let's write down all the variables and rank the value of all the variables and what percentage is this going to fall on one or both of our shoulders. And there were some things that were 50-50, right? Like product and design and engineering was like, well, more or less that's 50-50 Julian and Nick. And then there's some things Julian's going to do. Julian's going to do more recruiting and Nick's going to do more fundraising. So there was this recruiting, what percentage of the value of the future of the company is going to be based on the people we hire, and let's stack rank. And it was like we basically built this like really over-engineered algorithm for how to allocate equity. I feel embarrassed about it. I really want to be honest and vulnerable because I think that's our lane. But like I'm a little embarrassed even to this day about it. But like in the end, we didn't spend months on this. We spent probably a full day, right? A full business day, like going back and forth in this whiteboard. And at the end,
that much time.
I think from my memory, we did. I might be overstating it. But look, the steelman of that is, even though we were work colleagues and friends, maybe that was an investment in the communication and trust bank of us being very clear and transparent with how this is going to shake out. But the straw man is, that was way too much time. And in the end, I think we landed on 60-40. And then something that I think we've talked about since is, I think within a year of that, it was so obvious to me that like if anything was going to be made of this company in the future, it was far more equal. And like I think I don't remember how we structured it, but I think I
remember exactly what it was, because I
my equity and had it allocated for you.
I remember this vividly now because Pam brought it up. Pam is my wife, for anybody who doesn't know that. But Pam brought this up recently because she said it almost made her cry when she remembered it, because she was just like, wow, Nick really cares about you.
It was a really sincere thing. It was a really sincere thing.
Because what ended up happening was, I think, because we got in the trenches together, and I as the new, because look, building a startup isn't just writing code, right? And I'd like to think, as a to pat myself on the back a little bit, I think I embodied that when we started the block, and then which turned into Pocket List, because we went through the whole let's go talk to people, we built that whole exercise of scouts, right? Of hey, and I did not shy away. I wasn't content to be the guy who was just sitting there coding all day. I was like, go to apartments and go look at them, talk to landlords, talk to property managers. So I got into the shit with you. And I think over that time you saw me doing all that, and you're just like, all right, well, I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think 60/40 is appropriate anymore. And then I think what ended up happening, the way we structured it was, I think that didn't we have an abnormally large employee equity pool or something like that? And then I think you granted me extra shares out of the option pool.
Maybe that's what it was. All I know is that was very sincerely felt. I'm so proud that Pam and you and I all feel good about that. I think it was an example of a course correction based on real experience of realizing how overvalued the early days are sometimes.
And to glow you up too, I didn't ask for it. You just showed up one day and you were like, hey, we should talk. And then you handed me a piece of paper that was the whatever thing we had to execute to do the grant.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I mean, I'm not going to say no, but thank you.
But that's also another important thing, is it felt really important. It felt really culturally important to me to set that precedent, that aligning people and recognizing them, even if they're your co-founders, is really an important part of the process of building any durable company that is going to experience awful moments and exciting moments, etc. So in hindsight, I think when I feel cringy about that initial conversation, it's just, wow, that was an over-optimization. We totally overthought it. And for everything we've done since, it's been 50-50. And, I can imagine scenarios. I cannot imagine any scenarios with you, but I can imagine scenarios in the world where 50-50 doesn't make sense. Maybe someone's maybe in a capital intensive operation, someone's bringing a tremendous amount of personal capital or some initial very valuable deals, sales contracts that one partner is bringing at the very beginning, etc. I could imagine it, but what I would say to my younger self, and what I would say to any younger founders or future founders out there, is if you feel strongly about another human being enough to say, hey, start this thing with me, walk away from your perfectly sane and good job and do this crazy thing with me. And if they are crazy enough and have enough trust in you to say yes, that 50-50 or whatever the even split is often the fastest, most aligned, and most directionally accurate arrangement you can come to. And if things go catastrophically wrong, that will happen almost always in the first 12 months, and you can course correct from there.
Yeah. Said a different way, neither of us brought anything to the table except our brains.
Yeah, true.
and our willingness to go see 100, 200 apartments on behalf of other people.
There are a couple of weird corollaries here that I want to prompt you with. One is, if you want to talk about it or comment on it, the solo founder thing, which neither of us have done, but we've seen up close other people that have done it. So we could talk about that. So maybe a fifth bucket is only personal friends.
I think because we have
strangers and nobody. Those are the five categories.
I think rather than diving into it here, because neither of us has done it, I think maybe that's a future episode. We bring somebody on.
Yeah.
Who's willing to talk about what it was like to be a solo founder.
Do you want to talk about the co-CEO phenomenon? This is related, and I've got a hot take, but I want you to have first word if you.
Okay. What's funny is I think my position on it has evolved, because if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have been like, co-CEO's fucking stupid. It's that meme of Oscar from The Office talking about the two popes and the two captains of the ship. I would have been very much in that camp. I don't know. I just think it's one of those things where just like our 50-50 is not right for everybody, co-CEOs is probably not right for everybody, but it's probably great for some. It's probably exactly the right thing for some companies. I know that's non-specific and weird, but and a little like it depends, but that's kind of my feeling on it. Yeah, I don't know. Did you have a specific thought on it that you wanted to bring up?
I still think, look, never say never. There's always a reason for something, or you can always cherry pick a rationale for something. I think a co-CEO dynamic is a huge counter signal. Like what it signals to me is, and there are always exceptions to this, but what it signals to me is this is an organization that has unclear lines of decision-making autonomy, and it has a leadership that is shying away from having a difficult conversation. And that's not always true, but I think usually when you see a co-CEO situation, those are the two things that are going on under the hood, and those are tremendous counter signals for the future success of the company.
Counterpoint.
Yeah.
I know from having had conversations with people that a 50-50 co-founder split is a similar counter signal to people.
Okay.
So I'm not disagreeing with you.
So those people would say that Pocket List Nick and Julian were the right kind of negotiators that were getting really in the weeds about the valuable thing.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. And that a 50-50 co-founder split, that 50-50 co-founder split is like, if you just say, oh, we're just going to go 50-50, it's just like the logic behind the argument is like, oh, you just don't want to have a hard conversation about why you deserve more of that pie than your co-founder does.
That's interesting. I could imagine and entertain.
I'm not saying that necessarily applies to us, and they should cue Tobias, Tobias from Arrested Development going like, but it's going to be different for us. But I think there are just a track record from having worked together for so long. Just, I don't think there's any way that would make sense anymore. Like to not do 50 for us.
I could imagine someone making that argument from a serious place. I really don't agree with it though. Mostly because something else I remember that we should talk about is across both companies, regardless of the equity split that we had, I was very adamant and in my mind kind of a bulldog, although, maybe we filter our own first person experience through some lenses and you can correct me. But I remember pretty vividly across both conversations being adamant that there is a final decision maker and it is, and I would like to be it. And if it's not me, it's you. And we need to pre-agree to that because if the shit hits the fan, someone needs to make a call. And the ability for someone to make a call and have the backing of the organization is critical. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. We spent a lot of time talking about that even though we were co-founders. If shit ever hit the fan, which thankfully it never did for us, that like the emergency scenario, in case of emergency break glass scenario is that I could fire you. And that was in our board docs. Like that is not something I ever took lightly. And I hope you never felt that way. But I think that kind of accountability and that kind of clarity operationally is critical. And that is something to me that's more important than I'm going to like spend a bunch of time nickel and diming you over, 50 basis points of equity. That's either going to be worth nothing or so much I don't even care.
Yeah, I guess so. That brings up two things. One, that brings up a bigger question, a bigger discussion about equity versus control, which is I think an important thing to talk about, like in a governance of a company in general. And two, the other thing I wanted to just bring up was I don't remember who said this to me, but I remember having a conversation with somebody and saying, "Oh yeah, Nick is my business partner." He's like, "Oh, business partner. So you guys run the company together?" And it's like, no, Nick's the CEO. Well, technically Nick's the CEO and the CTO. So he's your boss. So you're not really partners. And I was just was scratching my head at that assessment. I was like, well, at the end of the day, he does have the final say, but it's very much a partnership. So I don't know why you feel the need to dig at that, but okay. I just let it go. But I just bring it up as like, Not everybody thinks that way. There's very much like a wide variety of thought around like what the dynamics are at play within a company, and like how specific, like how a CEO should behave, how co-founders, like, sort of how you could define co-founders, whether or not somebody's a partner, quote unquote.
Interesting.
It's weird. I bring it up just because it's weird.
That is interesting. That sounds like I would want to dig more if I were able to be there for that conversation. I'd want to dig more on that and see.
I really wish I remembered who it was that said
so
that
you could
to me,
name check them on this.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's funny because people don't. I think a lot of people's. I'm going to throw in another hot take. A lot of people's discomfort with this terminology and with these business arrangements is because even in the most brutal dog-eat-dog companies, these are important and nuanced relationships. And in some cases, certainly in I'm speaking for myself, but certainly in relation to you, my relationship to you is one of the most important relationships in my life. And there are ways in which it is similar to my marriage, to my wife. And there are ways in which there have been experiences and lessons I've learned in my marriage that have made me a better business partner to you. And there are ways in which being your business partner has made me a better husband to Kendra. And I think that level of vulnerability is really uncomfortable for some people. I wonder if that might be part of what whoever was talking about this with you, I wonder if that might have been part of it.
Maybe. Just if I had to restate it to try to understand it, are you saying that thinking of a business relationship that way and the vulnerability that would require is just something that that most people are not capable of doing? Like, it's like, I already do it maybe once in my life with my spouse, like have that level of, and that's a maybe. There's some people that don't do it with anybody. And
I don't know.
Even being married, to emphasize the point.
My point is that it is deeply vulnerable. And in the best cases, that vulnerability is rewarded with depth and trust. And sometimes it is burned. And that is why co-founder breakups can tank 65% of startups, which I found this citation. It's Noam Wasserman is a researcher of entrepreneurship and startups. I actually went to a talk of his, and he has a book called The Founder's Dilemma or The Co-Founder's Dilemma. And just wanted to real time follow up that because I looked it up. The point I'm making is that it is emotionally vulnerable. It's an emotionally vulnerable relationship, and most people are uncomfortable even talking about it on those terms. And therefore, their experience of that relationship is going to be stunted, in my opinion. I might be wrong, but I think that's true. And
I think there's something to it. I think there's something to it.
I mean, I'll go a layer deeper on vulnerability. I am very open with the fact that I've been in therapy for quite a long time, and psychotherapy. And that's been a tremendously positive experience. I mean, that could be 10 episodes right there. But the degrees to which our co-founder relationship has been the subject of a lot of that work. And I am convinced that our co-founder relationship is and was better, and our companies got farther or were more successful than they otherwise would have been if I had not been doing that work. And I think it comes from willingness to be vulnerable, willingness and ability to have difficult conversations, willingness and ability to extend trust and receive trust from someone else. And these are really nuanced and really scary things for most people. But they're scary for me, but I just have built up the muscle memory of being a vulnerable and trusting person. And I think our co-founder relationship across multiple companies and our company cultures have been stronger for it. That's just my subjective opinion. There's no way to measure that. And it'd be interesting if anyone disagreed. That's worked.
I think that's true. I mean, look, it's when you talk about the trust, like if we're talking about something concrete, like why, like where this matters, right? Is that, when things are going great, it's very easy to communicate clearly, right? Because you're happy to bring all the news that happens. Like if we just raised a new round, like, oh, we just hit our growth targets. Like that's very easy to talk about. When it comes to like, hey, we're gonna have to let half of the engineering team go. or we're running out of money at the end of the month unless we close a deal. Those are scary things to say out loud to another person, especially when it's your fault or like, it's something that was your responsibility to stay on top of. In order for somebody to be able to do that and bring the bad news, you have to be able to trust the person who's receiving the news isn't gonna just crush you as a result, right?
I don't know why I'm feeling the need to also explore the idea that this is more than just mushy feelings, and that I believe that there is a quantitative benefit to all of these things we're talking about.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting impulse. I'm being self-aware right now of how weird it is that I feel the need to say, well, Julian and Nick aren't just buddies. They don't just like hugging each other. There's actually a quantifiable 13% increase in the ability to execute code and sell.
Well, okay, look. I don't think that's a weird thing to bring up because at the end of the day, like if you're running a startup, it lives and dies on whether or not you're growing, whatever that metric might be. And almost all of your decisions have to be oriented around, does this move us forward in some way?
Yeah.
And like to make it to tie it back to like, not just, it's like, oh, it feels good to work with Nick. It's like, no, decisions happen faster. Like if I feel like I can trust you to be like, hey, this shit isn't working and we really need to course correct. If I can't trust you to hear me and take my communication seriously, then I'm going to sit on news that you need to hear by, for another week or 2 weeks. Maybe you find out without me. And even on the order of like a couple days or a couple weeks, like that costs you a lot.
Yeah. It compounds over time.
Yeah.
Trust.
And it compounds the more often it happens. Right.
Yeah.
Like, at its core, it's also just like it's a speed thing.
Yeah. Trust is a friction reduction agent.
Yeah.
Trust is a lubricant. That's a weird way of saying it. I totally agree. I mean, I don't even think it's that radical of a thought, right? Imagine just working on the same project twice with two different people, right? Just imagine it's like a college class. You have to write a paper together and one person, typos their emails like an idiot to you. And you think, God, I've got to double check this person's writing, whether or not they misspelled anything. You feeling like you have to double check their work is going to add cognitive load and to you and your task and slow your execution down. But when you trust someone, that's not there. So, I mean, that was a weird example, but I mean, think about it. Like I've heard you with some consulting projects we worked on where, if, for example, you're coding with somebody or you're contributing to a code base and that person commits buggy or commits pull requests that have no tests, or, I mean, you're the engineer. I don't know what I'm talking about, but
I got to be careful here because there's going to be like, if people listen to this and they'll be like, is he talking about me? I hope he's not talking about me.
He's not talking about you. But trust is an accelerant, right? Or legally, right? Oh, if I think you're trying to screw me and I'm going to reread every legal document you send me, how much time is that going to take?
Yeah.
Maybe you will screw me, maybe you won't screw me. But if I feel like you're going to screw me, I'm going to behave differently. And it's almost always going to be in a way that slows down my speed of execute, my spark.
Yeah. Oh, actually, going back to the legal thing that we started with earlier, that's actually one of the biggest parts of it is like in terms of the trust building and friction removal. If you put everything out in writing and you have it in a legal document, like it's not that you're guaranteed to never get screwed over, but it does sort of give you like okay, well, at least if they try to screw me over, there's a legal document that I can fall back on to be able to say, look, no, this is what the contract says. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gives you the piece, lets you like not worry about that problem happening and operate from more like, I know to a lot of people that may sound counterintuitive. It's like, why do I want to get into a protracted legal document writing exercise and arguing over points? Because that seems like it would erode trust more than anything else. But no, once you have everything hammered out, it's sort of like you don't really need to think about it anymore.
Oh, so are you saying that the process of hammering out and executing a legal document is itself a trust enhancement or trust enforcement mechanism to a relationship? Is that what you're kind of saying?
I think so.
Like, I think I'd agree. I just didn't.
I think so. In a weird way, it's sort of like the act of going through the work of building the legal document. Everybody's clear about what is and isn't in and out of bounds. Everybody's clear about like what the consequences are if somebody doesn't hold up their side of this. And it gives everybody very clear boundaries. And therefore, like, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't have to really think about it anymore once it's on paper.
Yeah.
I don't really need to be, well, you should, I'm not saying you shouldn't be vigilant with people that you're working with, but it does remove like a certain amount of that. It's like there's a recourse, there's a fallback if something really goes wrong, and you can always go back to it. I think in that way, a lot of people go into like, we got to write up a contract as like why do we got to do this? We like, you don't trust me. On some level, no, but on some level, if we go through this exercise, I'll trust you a whole lot more.
Yeah,
because I know you're not hiding anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another question I get a lot in college classes is how do you think about the difference between a co-founder and how that impacts equity, allocation, et cetera, versus like an early employee? Like, where do you draw the line? Like, why aren't the first 10 people at a company considered co-founders? And that, in my guts, felt like I felt confused when someone asked me that question the first time, but after the third or fourth time, I thought, okay, this is a valid question that a lot of people have. And it feels obvious to me, but it clearly isn't obvious. And I was curious if maybe we can unpack that a little bit. Like, what are the properties of a co-founder versus an early employee?
To me, it's willingness to do things that are potentially outside of your job scope. Like an early employee, while there's a certain amount of like, yes, everybody's got to wear different hats when they're at a startup, employees still have some things that they're not going to be expected to do, right? Like a front-end engineer that I hire as an early employee, I'm not necessarily going to be asking them to be cold calling offices for leads, right? Like it's just not something I'm going to do, especially given their skill set. It's just not in their skill set, and it's not something I'm going to ask them to do. A co-founder is somebody who is willing to, like, is like, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's fucking sweeping the floors in the office. I'm going to do it if it has to be done.
So one thing that comes up, this doesn't happen often to us, thankfully, but if you're going to miss payroll, it's like it's not even a consideration to ask someone that's not a co-founder to miss payroll.
Well, in dire enough situations, it can be, but typically, like, you usually go, if you're going down the layers, right? It's like,
first man down is the co-founders. Yeah.
First pay period where we might not have enough money. It's the co-founders who are not getting paid.
Absolutely.
Right?
Or they may be working longer for no pay or for extremely reduced pay. That would be another property of being a co-founder.
Yeah. Like if you want to, like, and to a certain extent, in exchange for equity, most early employees are taking a pay cut relative to going to work at a giant conglomerate, right? But it's never like it's nowhere close to the low pay that you're going to be accepting as a founder.
Yeah. There are also a couple considerations that are regulatory, and I'm going from memory here. I don't want to misstate this, so let me just state it generally, that depending on how much equity someone has or ownership someone has, it gives them different rights and responsibilities. The largest of which being like if you are a 25% or greater owner of stock in a company, that comes with all sorts of extra liability and extra responsibilities when it comes to the operation of the business and the law, even if you don't have a board seat. So disclosures, right? Opening bank accounts, stuff like that. The KYB, know your business.
I'll give you a real concrete one that happened to me when I was buying my house was when the mortgage underwriter found out that I was a co-founder of a company. They were like, "Oh, how much of the company do you own?" Because if you own more than, I think the threshold was like 25% or something like that, then you need to open the company books to us to verify your that the business is healthy, which, at the time there was no revenue to the company, which means that I wouldn't have qualified for the mortgage.
Yeah.
But luckily by that point, I think we had taken on enough investment that I had diluted myself below 25%.
Yeah.
So then I was able to make the argument that you don't need to see that because I'm below 25%.
Interesting. So that's a big one. Another one is functional. Like usually in my mind, it's like the first people that have different areas or fields of responsibility, right? You've got your first marketing person, you've got your first engineering person, you've got your first salesperson, your first product person, whatever. And depending on when they join, if they're functionally distinct from one another, that's another way to break down, the line between co-founder and employee, right? If you've got a CTO co-founder, then your second or third engineer is not, everyone's very important at that stage, but they're not necessarily co-founder, although there are exceptions to that. And I can think of a lot of successful and big tech companies, for example, that had two co-founders that were both engineers, for example. I think Larry Page and Sergey Brin are probably the exhibit A of that dynamic. So I think there's a functional component to it too. It seems to me that it would be weird that like one sales person and 5 designers would all be 6-way co-founders with one another. Although, I guess it takes all kinds. Really, I think it's how much risk are you willing to bear? If you approach someone and say, hey, I've got an idea and I can't pay you until God knows when, and I'm not paying myself, and let's spend a lot of time on this together.
Yeah.
And let's be equal or close to equal owners of the equity in the beginning of this thing. I mean, that in and of itself is a co-founder dynamic. And I think we've seen people, and in some circumstances, we've been people that have been early enough at a company that it might trigger the Nick definition of co-founder, even though that wasn't really how we were treated.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that says.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still think that, like, it probably just comes down to, especially, it comes down to, like, how long did you work for without pay or very low pay? How much responsibility did you take on in that time? And how specific was the work that you were doing, right? Like, were you doing only engineering, and were you doing only mobile designs only when, there's a lot of other stuff to work on? Like, I think there's some combination of that makes the determination.
Can't imagine being a solo founder. It seems so scary and overwhelming to me that I don't even know I don't even know how I would think about that. React to that. How do you feel?
I mean, yes, I agree. I mean, I've never done it, so I don't really know. But I've been up close with people who have done it, and it looks very difficult and lonely. But I do want to say there's you experience somewhat what it's like being the CEO of the company, because there are things that you can't necessarily even directly share with me sometimes, right? Like there's some, does that ever, do you see what I'm saying? Like there's some things that you can't directly, there will be inevitably some things that you can't directly share with even your co-founder. Or there's some things where it's like you're by yourself handling fundraising, or long stretches where you're handling fundraising by yourself. And you can bring back summaries to me and bounce ideas off of me, but at the end of the day, you're doing most of that stuff by yourself. So how did that feel? Liz, I guess that's what I'm leading up. Like how did that feel?
I cannot think
am I mischaracterizing it?
I cannot think of a single time in 9 years where we were co-founders of 2 companies together. I cannot think of a single time when I kept something from you, no matter how well-intentioned. There are definitely things that I did alone or I had to do alone, but I never felt like if I had asked, you would have said no, right? But I think there's a difference in what you're saying. I do want to push back on what you're saying, because there's a slight difference between there's nothing I ever kept from you. There is stuff that I deferred or delayed, if only to keep you focused on the important stuff that you were focused on. So as a division of responsibilities, right? Like, do I need to, I just had a bad sale. I can think of one example. Nick, just with 48 hours notice, got on an airplane and flew to Paris, France to try to close a 7-figure deal. And the meeting bombed. And it's 11 p.m. It's 11 p.m. Pacific time right now. And does Julian need me to bug him, or can it wait 12 hours? Right? Like that kind of stuff. Sure. Okay. And when I'm alone in my hotel room, it's dark and weird and sad. Or actually another way, similar one. Perfect example. When I found out, I'm not going to name names, but when I found out that big deal fell through when we were together in Amsterdam at a conference, and I got the email at I got the email at 11 o'clock at night, and we were in the same hotel in different rooms, and I got that email And I was like, this is the kind of thing I need to tell my co-founder on the spot. But like, we both had just an exhausting day.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought my co-founder and friend Julian will be the first person other than me to find out this information. But right now he's in his room. It's been a long day. He's tired. He might already be asleep. And if I tell him this news, 2 people are going to be up all night. And so I'm just going to sit on this for 12 hours so that only one person can be up all night. And that person's name is Nick. And then I told you at breakfast the next morning, and it sucked.
Yeah, I remember very vividly that breakfast, walking down, meeting you in the hotel, like, breakfast bar, and just feeling like yesterday wasn't that bad of a day. The vibes are off. Like, what's going on?
So there was that kind of stuff, but there's nothing I kept from you for longer than 24 hours. And anything that I deflected or shielded or paused was mostly my trying to be a good leader and a good partner to you by just giving you the headspace to do what you needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there are a few times where I felt temporarily lonely, but it was never very long lived. And I can't imagine that. Some people do it very successfully. I don't know. When you find someone that you trust as much as I trust you, it's like, if I'm working on something and you're interested in what I'm working on and the price is half of my ownership, I don't give a shit. Like, let's go have some fun. That's how I look at it. In fact, I'm thinking of like side gigs and projects right now. It's like, if any of them had any inkling of taking off or having critical mass or velocity, terminal velocity, I'd be like, all right, Julian, come on. I mean, you might say no, but like my first instinct would be to say like, do you want to do this with me?
Yeah. And to be clear, I'd do the same thing. I just don't have ideas at the same clip you do. So I don't know when that's going to happen for me.
A blessing and a curse, man. It's a blessing and a curse. All right. I think that's about it for today. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, good session. Like and subscribe. That's the only thing I can say. Like and subscribe.
Tell a friend about us. I'm going to record a bumper now that we've got a name. Net Good, the podcast. We're trying to.
That's true. We jumped in without even saying what the name of the podcast is. We are Net Good.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why we picked that name?
I'll be honest, I don't remember what specifically you said that Bobby picked out of a conversation.
Yeah, our good friend Bobby
Net Good. Net Good. That's a good name. They're like, that is a good name.
Yeah.
What did you say? What did you say that he picked it out of? I don't even remember.
I don't really remember either. I think we were just talking about how we spend our time working really hard and trying to bring value to people in one way, shape, or form. And if when we're old, we look back and think that what we spent our energy on was a net good for society, for our customers, for our investors, et cetera, then it will be time well spent. It was something corny like that, but net good. We hope on net this podcast is good. All right.
We can't promise any individual episode will be like spectacular, but it'll be the whole thing will be net good.
Yeah. All right, man. Good talking to you. I'll see you soon.
All right, man. Thank you. Bye.